Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This one is going to be my review and discussion for Star Wars The High Republic The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott. So this is the second mainline or adult novel in The High Republic. It's like the centerpiece of Wave 2 of the releases for the books of The High Republic. So just for anyone who's kind of unaware or maybe hasn't thought about The High Republic since the first wave came out, Wave 1 was basically Light of the Jedi as the main novel, Into the Dark was the YA novel, Test of Courage was the middle grade book, and then they also launched the two comic series at the same time. The IDW one, which is called, I think, High Republic Adventures, as well as the mainline Marvel High Republic comic series. It's just, I think, called The High Republic. They've been ongoing since there, so I think most of them are up to issue 6. I read the first 3 issues of the Marvel comic series, but that's as far as I've gone. For the most part with the comics, I'm tending to wait until the trade paperbacks come out, just because I don't really get the opportunity to go to my local comic book store as much these days to pick up the single issues, and I don't really like buying digital single issues, so I'm just for the most part going to wait to see what happens there. I roughly know what's going on in the comics, but obviously I haven't read every single thing. Wave 2 is obviously The Rising Storm as the Light of the Jedi equivalent. The YA book, the second one, is coming out the end of this month, and that is going to be called Out of the Shadows, and looks to be basically a sequel to the previous book in terms of the characters they're utilizing and so on. And then the middle grade book for this time out is Race to Crash Point Tower, which happens, I believe, concurrently with events towards the middle of this book. I'm assuming there's a bit more going on at the start in terms of, I know certain characters do appear in it, and it's not just, I think, resolving that one plot, but for the most part it seems like it's there to help resolve a plot point that seemingly just sort of resolves itself when you read just The Rising Storm. I haven't read Race to Crash Point Tower yet. Again, it's another situation where I'm waiting for my physical copies of The Rising Storm and Race to Crash Point Tower to arrive, but I did get the audiobook for Rising Storm in the meantime, but I didn't want to spend an Audible credit on Race to Crash Point Tower because it's like a 3-hour audiobook, and that is not particularly good value in my mind. So I'm just going to wait to get the book on that. So the review for that one, I will read it, I will review it, but it might be a week or two before I actually get my hands on that book, and then I will be reviewing Out of the Shadows. So yeah, let's all that out of the way, let's get into Rising Storm. So I'm going to start with some very brief non-spoiler thoughts, and just because I feel like, the focus of this has to be on the discussion of what actually happens. We know what the High Republic is about at this point, so there's no need to, I think, linger on talking vaguely about what happens in the book. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. The switch from a different writer from the first book into this one, to me, I didn't really notice it all that much. The quality felt just as high as it was before. It had the same sort of feel as the first book, which I thought was actually quite good, given that we had a writer change. They're all working together on this overall High Republic project, but it was nice the way that they were able to not make it feel like a super big shift from writer to writer. The same format, and this is what I think is really good about the two kind of adult books being very much in line with each other, is that they're very Nihil focused. I know the comic is tending to focus more on the Drengir, as well as some of I think the YA books are focused on that. So I like that the Nihil threat, I think it's involved in some of the other material as well, but they're using the focus, the main story of the Nihil seems to be within these novels, which is good. So if you like the Nihil dynamic from Light of the Jedi, you're going to like it here because you've got the same kind of scheming between the members. The mystery of the leader, Marchion Ro, continues to be kind of built up, as well as a few more sort of reveals that begin to maybe open the door to maybe what angle they're taking with it, but still keeping him mostly in mystery for now. In terms of the kind of hero characters that we explore in this book, basically, you can consider it to be roughly the same main cast as Light of the Jedi, but we've swapped out Avar Kriss for Stellan Gios, because the support characters to Stellan, who I suppose you would say is the main Jedi of this book, are Elzar, who was in Light of the Jedi, Bell, who I suppose is our main sort of younger character in the main novels, and then you get like references to a lot of the kind of other characters as well. Like we see Porter Engle again here, as well as meeting a few other Jedi. And then, you know, they of course connect the dots. There's a lot of Jedi here. So you get to see Jedi that are from the comic series, from this other book. You know, Vernestra from A Test of Courage is Stellan's former Padawan. So she turns up in this book as well. So there's nice references. There's nice connective tissue between like everything that's going on here, which is really good. And look, if it was to linger in on one thing that is probably still perhaps like an issue that is maybe going to be, you know, depend on person to person, is that it's still very broad. It still feels very like I'm still getting used to the sheer amount of like new characters that are happening here in this book. Light of the Jedi was very much a huge ensemble cast that was like to start off the High Republic era. And I was wondering, like, are we going to focus in a little bit more on individual characters here, or are we still going to have a quite broad cast? And it's like, yes and no. It doesn't feel like there's as many things going on as Light of the Jedi, but they're still maybe not focusing in as laser focused on just a few characters here. In that, like I said, there's Stellan, Elzar, Bell, and then on the Nihil side you have like Marchion, and then the Tempest Runners, of course. But then you also have like a new character introduced in Ty Yorick, and her whole arc is like she makes her sort of debut here. You have a little bit of a political kind of dynamic going on the other side of the book with the Chancellor Lina So, and you get introduced to her son. And there's this other senator that gets introduced called Tia Toon, who's kind of interesting as well. Plus, you know, other characters that are linked into their stories like as well. So like Elzar has a dynamic with one of the people who's running the fair. You know, Lina So's son starts a relationship with this other character, and they have a little subplot going on. And then like there's this other Jedi that gets introduced, and then Ty Yorick is hired by these two characters who also are quite important. So the first time I read this book, I came out of it feeling like, oh yeah, I really liked that. That was just as good as the first book in my mind. But I also was like, what happened in the first half of the book? I don't remember like a single thing. So I'm immediately, why this review isn't being recorded like a day or two after the release is because I had to read this book a second time to get this all straight in my head. Now, I had a similar thing with Light of the Jedi where I don't think I got to that review as quickly as I perhaps, you know, could have. These books, like I said, they are the core of like telling the story of the High Republic. So there is a lot going on, which deserves praise because it's the complete opposite of like most of the other Star Wars novels that are being released at this moment, where they're almost like afraid to do anything in the eras that are known because due to lack of confidence, not knowing what stories to tell, or because they know they're in this really weird spot where they'll just be basically retelling the old EU, but not as good as the old EU. So here in the High Republic, their new era, it feels like they have everything going for them, and they can make this stuff feel big and impactful. And yes, like I said, it's going to take some time for I think everyone to get used to the scope of the plan here and just how many characters of note that we actually have. In terms of like I said, I'm not even really bringing up a lot of the other references that we have here, in that they'll name drop like 10 Jedi in one chapter, referencing like a little bit of everything and all this sort of stuff going on. So overall, like in terms of finishing up this kind of non-spoiler section, what I would just say is that I think this is like a really good, I'm guessing what they're doing is that there's going to be sort of 3 adult novels within the first phase of the High Republic. And I'm guessing the third one will get more sort of answers and major reveals as we go into the second stage of the High Republic. So this one I felt a little bit like the sort of middle stage, in that you still come out of this feeling like you have roughly the same questions, the same mysteries as from Light of the Jedi. You just know a little bit more about what's going on. Similarly, the character arcs, they're still setting up stuff. Like, this is for the most part the debut of Stellan within the books. So you just begin to set the stage for what his arc is going to be. Roughly the same with Elzar. Like, they continue on from the first book, but again, because he was just one of about like 5 or 6 focus characters in the first book, he only gets like a little bit more of his arc. So it feels like it's properly more in gear now, but that there's still a lot of kind of room to grow depending on where they're going to tell the story of all of these characters. Bell, again, similarly, we open up this book with him like reacting to what happened in the first book, and then in terms of a transition period, it's more of like, okay, he's growing, and then big moment at the end sort of changes his direction potentially. So in terms of like the plot, obviously the focus is on the Republic Fair. It gets attacked by the Nihil, and the idea is like, okay, a few things sort of stem off from this. This is a year on from the first book, so the great disaster and everything about that has kind of been averted for the most part. We're still dealing with the after effects. The Drengir crisis is happening sort of across the galaxy. Avar is kind of leading the Jedi against that threat. Here we're more focused on the Nihil, who at the end of the first book took a decision to basically cool things down. Marchion at the end of the first book was like, okay, we're not going to do any major strikes for the next while. We need to build up again. And obviously the idea is that the other Tempest runners don't like that, so they disagree with him. And so that's where you get the sort of Nihil plot of the difference in Marchion's grand plan versus the group that he's leading doesn't have particular foresight for the future necessarily. So he's this very intelligent character organizing a group of, characters who are still intelligent in their own ways, but are, for the most part, bandits, rather brutish. They just want to, ride the storm, as they always talk about. So there's a nice contrast on that side of the book. And where we end, it feels like, oh yeah, the next book is going to have to really place stuff, put everything in place to set up what the second stage is. And like what we're doing with this opening stage of the High Republic is transitioning basically from the golden era to here's all these crises happening one after the other. How does the Republic, which has been so strong of late, deal with them? And how does the Jedi, which has also been in a golden age, how do they deal with it? So we're gradually, I suppose, fracturing both of these things. And then we're going to go into the middle phase, which I'll guess is going to be more out-and-out war across the galaxy between the Republic and Jedi against the Nihil and Drengir. And we'll see where they go. Because, they've already talked about the different phases. I think the first phase is like Light of the Jedi, and then the middle phase is like, I can't remember the exact names, but it's something like, it's a gradual fall. It's like Light, Twilight, Fall of the Jedi, that type of thing. So, still really good. Oh, so for final non-spoiler thoughts, I would recommend you read this book if you liked the first one. Now, let's get into the spoilers. There's a lot to talk about here. In terms of like major reveals, like it's kind of surprising that there's maybe not as many as you'd think, but just reading the book, just page to page, it is a really, really good read. The general kind of flow of the book is that the first half is mostly setup. There is a big attack at the start, but it's an attack, it happens, we resolve that, we build up, the fair is about to happen, boom, halfway point of the book, the Nihil attack the Republic Fair. This is the centerpiece of the book, it's where most of the rest of the book takes place. But even then, once the attack on the fair is repelled, and we're dealing with the aftermath of the damage, you think the book is just going to end there. Just on the idea that they won in the end, but they lost a lot in this attack. But then these two other kind of plot points come out of this sort of epilogue to the attack on the fair, and we get this like information about this where the Nihil are going to strike next. So they manipulate that to kind of force the Nihil to attack here, but they're ready for them. And it's this really cool Republic counterattack where they completely take part of the Nihil by surprise. And then this other plot that relates to like Tai and the people she's working for, where they manage to actually get Bell and his master in close to the Gaze Electric, and basically they find the home base of the Nihil, which gets attacked. And there's a huge action set piece right towards the end of the book. But that's basically the flow of the book. If you want a sense for the plot, we start with a Nihil attack on the Cyclor shipyards, which is the second biggest shipyards in the galaxy after Corellia. In the aftermath of this, where Bell gets injured during this attack, he's there with his master defending the shipyards. The key significance of the Cyclor shipyards is that they're doing the final touches on the new ship called the Innovator, which is going to be shown off at the Republic Fair as one of the main kind of attractions. It's a research and exploration vessel. It's huge. It's kind of like it's basically one of the great works in a way of the Republic. It's going to be incredible as they explore the galaxy. So they repel that attack. Bell gets really badly injured but survives. The discovery of Bacta really helps in all of this. But why have the Nihil attacked? Because the plot point at the end of the previous book was that Marchion told them no more attacks. We need to calm things down. And this is where we get that plot point of Marchion and his struggle with maintaining full control over the Nihil. We know from the first book that the Eye it's a leadership position in mostly name only, in that, for the most part, the leadership of the Nihil is with the 3 Tempest Runners, who are effectively the leaders of 1/3 of the Nihil each, and they just roughly fall under the Eye of the Nihil because Ro and his family have the paths to give out. And that's the only real reason Marchion has any power. Now, in Light of the Jedi, he did enough to, I suppose, get more support from more of the Nihil at large, and including gaining sort of, loyalty from, aspects of the Tempest Runners. But what you see here is Pan Eta, specifically as a Tempest Runner, really doesn't like Ro. He doesn't like that Ro is trying to take over more than he feels the Eye should take over. He feels like it is the Tempests who do most of the work for the Nihil. They should remain as the leaders as they've been all this time. He really sees Marchion as just being this sort of young upstart who's trying to change things. He disagrees with it and wants the Nihil to just be the Nihil. Ride the storm, attack, be their usual sort of bandit selves, whereas Marchion, of course, has a much deeper, complicated plan in his mind. So that's kind of important to note, that that's the dynamic there between those two, the ones who are mostly at odds with each other. Lorna D, the Twi'lek Tempest Runner, is sort of judging where she should place her loyalties. She likes things the way they were before, with the 3 Tempest Runners mainly in control, but is also kind of like, okay, if Marchion is going to try and take over properly and, he has some good plans, I'm kind of okay with that. She wants to wait and see kind of what happens, so she's kind of just sitting in the background and supporting, someone when they need to, the other person when they need to, and then the new 3rd Tempest Runner, Zetar, is just kind of there as a replacement. They sort of get across the idea that he was sort of handpicked by Marchion, so the other 2 aren't fully behind him, because it feels like it's a political play for Marchion to gain more control over the Nihil. But obviously the issue is Marchion comes back from a secret thing he was doing, which we'll get to, and he finds out that Pan ordered this attack on the Cyclor shipyards, which obviously fails. It doesn't work that well, and they lose some pretty key members when they shouldn't really be losing a lot of people. There's a reason Marchion told them to kind of calm down after the events of the first book, because, again, the Nihil were pretty badly, defeated at the end of the last book, and they lost roughly 1/3 of their forces. Now they've lost another fraction of that, and Marchion is very, very frustrated with Pan. And as you go through the book, you just get loads of these scenes of the two just at odds with each other. And Marchion, of course, like has a lightsaber at this point. You know, we know he's more like sort of a ninja, where he uses like tools and stuff like that. He doesn't have the strength to match the species that Pan is, so he has to use kind of trickery and cleverness. And he keeps getting the advantage over Pan in a lot of these kind of instances. But he realizes that, you know, most of the Nihil are probably more in line with the way the Tempest Runners think than the way he does. So he has to sort of balance trying to change things while still doing the usual Nihil thing. So he's sort of forced by Pan and Pan's control over the Nihil to make a decision to be like, okay, you guys want to raid again. Okay, we're going to do a big one this time. We're going to try and kill the Chancellor, Lina Soh. He gives this massive speech. It's really well done in the audiobook. Gets everyone behind him. And really, like, they really view this moment as like, wow, we thought this was going to be the point where Pan overthrows Marchion, but Marchion's just got control all over again with this speech by just going straight over Pan. So he orders this attack, which Pan ultimately like agrees with, which is the problem here, that like Marchion ordered an attack bigger than anything Pan would have planned. And he has the advantage because he can say to all the people that you want to follow Pan, but Pan just led an attack that completely failed just there, after I told you not to do it. So let's do it my way and we'll actually make this work. So the plan is to attack the Republic Fair on Valo. That's the planet it's happening on. And they want to target the Innovator, which they failed to destroy in the opening attack on the shipyards, as well as try and kill the Chancellor. And this is going to be a massive win for the Nihil if they can make it happen. But, in a way, this is Marchion just kind of buying time for himself to gain more control over the Nihil, as well as do his secret things that he's doing in the background, which I suppose is now the time to talk about. This plot point is very interesting, but it's probably one of the smaller plot points in the book because it's covered right at the start, a little bit in the middle, and then right at the end. And it's the whole Great Leveler, or just the Leveler, plot point. So at the start of the book, the reason Marchion isn't around and why they're able to organize an attack without him being there is because he is off with another Nihil called Udi Dis, who is Force sensitive. So Marchion chooses this guy, brings him with him to this planet that seems to have a connection to his family. He goes to basically visit his cousin, who effectively guards over this specific creature which is trapped in ice. So they have to go on a bit of a journey here to get to the creature in the ice. They fight this giant monster. Ro uses the lightsaber. He basically gets eaten and has to lightsaber his way out. Udi Dis reveals that he's Force sensitive. It's not that he's related to the Jedi at all. He's just from a species that happens to be fairly commonly Force sensitive. And he uses the abilities, whereas most of the species chooses not to because they're too sort of respectful of the Force. So that's kind of interesting. There's also a little bit of history that you get here where they talk about his species, that they basically say his species was wiped out by the Sith. They talk about, beings wielding, red lightsabers effectively. They don't use the word lightsabers, but they're like red plasma swords or something like that. So that was kind of interesting. But there's a reason that this is all here. So they fight their way through the creature, so through some guard droids, and they meet Marchion's cousin, who's a bit crazy, of course. She's old, and basically just warns him, like, are you sure you want to do this? And they go ahead and get in front of this creature. Again, they're very mysterious with the way to describe this creature, but it's trapped in ice, but it's alive. And so its powers resonate out from the ice. And they reveal here that it affects Force users. So Udi Dis is affected by coming into the presence of this creature. And it basically makes him go sort of mad. Like, he remembers his past to a degree. It makes him lost in thought. It makes him weak. And they sort of establish that, like, it nullifies his ability to use the Force to a degree. In that they describe that, like, in the earlier fights, he couldn't use the Force to sort of sense when stuff was coming, the sort of spider sense aspect of the Force. He couldn't really use that before because it was in the presence of this creature. So they immediately established that's the significance of this thing. It can impact Force users, so that means it's going to have an effect on Sith and Jedi alike. So that's just pretty interesting by itself. Now, what happens here is that Marchion notices the effect that it has on Udi and is like, oh, this is good. This is what I want. I wanted to see that it had a strong effect against Force users. So he just kills Udi, then and there. Udi's already been injured, but he kills him. He kills his cousin as well. And he then takes the creature in ice. He doesn't remove it from the ice. He takes the block of ice onto the Gaze Electric and basically tells the kind of technician guy he has on his ship, okay, I want you to come up with a way to basically unfreeze this thing quickly out of the ice, as well as graft a camera onto its back. And we get the idea that he's planning to use this creature for something, and there's just a few more steps that need to be put into place before this happens. We also get revealed, like right towards the end of the book, that the rod thing that Marchion had at the end of the first book that he should have showed to Loden, he now has a second copy of that, and it's revealed that the two of them go together to form this bigger rod, which is some sort of control method for this creature, which is called the Leveler, though at the end of the book they do say that is not the creature's actual name, that is just what it is called by I suppose Ro's family, basically. Leveler, Great Leveler, whatever way you want to call it. So this rod controls this creature, and at the very end of the book, again, the stuff I'll be mentioning here, I'll have to go through a little bit to explain how this actually ends up happening. But whatever. Bell and Loden are fighting on the ground on Gryzel, which is where the Nihil base is, right at the end of the book. And the Gaze Electric, obviously, is where this creature is being held. Marchion has it freed from the ice. It runs past him, jumps onto the ground, basically right next to Loden and Bell. And they basically immediately cut away. We get no real reaction from Bell and Loden to what this creature actually does, outside of, I think, Bell and Loden's perspective of just the same thing that sort of happened to Udi Dis, where like they just begin to go a little mad, and it begins to really affect them to where they're in the middle of battle, but like they're not in the middle of battle anymore because this thing is impacting them so much. And then we cut to the very last chapter of the book where Stellan and some of the other Jedi arrive on Gryzel to the battlefield where the Nihil are fled from. So they've basically beaten them and made them run away from their own base. But they find Bell like broken, like emotionally broken, sort of on the ground in tears. And behind him is a statue of Loden Greatstorm, who's just been freed from imprisonment for a year, but there he is as a statue. Stellan goes up to just like touch it, and the statue crumbles away. And you get this reveal that that was Loden. The creature did this to Loden. Loden was turned into stone by this creature, and now the stone is gone, so Loden is dead. It is an interesting thing though, because they describe it that like Stellan touches the statue and it like crumbles inwards, as if like it's not just that the entire thing is turned into solid stone, it's like a stone shell almost, and there's nothing in it. So it's kind of a weird dynamic. I wonder how exactly it works, but that seems to be the effect that it has. Now obviously what happens to the Leveler is that right as it goes down and does this thing, Ro calls it back up onto the ship and they escape to hyperspace. So the Gaze Electric gets away, Ro gets away, but the Nihil have been pretty badly sort of beaten over the course of this book, and they're going to need to sort of try again, build up and try again. But it's going to take some time, I think, because this Great Leveler, it's just one creature. They sort of established that at the moment. I don't get the impression it is a like hugely massive creature to where it alone is going to turn the tides of war necessarily, but it seems like it's substantially big enough to where it's going to be a threat wherever it is used, but it doesn't seem like unassailable necessarily at this point. Again, is it described particularly well? Not really. It has 4 legs, like I said, and you know, obviously it's a powerful creature with like these abilities to impact on Force users. Why it's called the Leveler, we're not really sure. There's a few other things with Marchion where like he has basically visions of his father throughout the book, and we find out that, oh, Marchion was the one who killed his father. Yes, his father had been sort of injured, like an assassination attempt by another member of the Nihil against him. So that left his father sort of like basically on the verge of death. But it was Marchion who finished the job. So it establishes an issue there, a conflict between him and his father. But the visions he has in the later stages of the book are basically of his father telling him that, like, you shouldn't use this creature. Don't use it. You can't control it. But Ro is kind of like, no, I can. I found the two pieces. I can now control it myself. And the vision of his father is still saying that, like, basically you're a fool. You don't know what you're getting into. And Ro thinks he's clever enough that he's figured it out, how to control it effectively. So the question is, obviously, it's called the Leveler. Why is it called that? What's the deal with Marchion and his connection to everything that's going on? So there's still the whole stuff from the first book, where there's some connection between the Ro family and the San Tekka clan with regards to how they came into possession of Mari San Tekka, which is where the paths come from. There's also this connection of the fact that the Ro family seems to know quite in detail the best way to keep Jedi hostage, which perhaps speaks to some connection with the Jedi, or more likely with the Sith, based on the fact that Ro seems to know where to find what seem to be Sith artifacts. So I don't know what exact way they're going to go with this, in terms of, are they going to reveal someone in Ro's family as Force sensitive, or more likely are they just like Sith acolytes that they support the Sith back in an era where the Sith were more public? I'm not really sure on that, but that's the basic idea here with Ro. So you don't really get any reveals necessarily about Ro as such, but it continues the mystery, adds a little bit more on, and then they have you thinking about how the Great Leveler is going to be used going forward. So he has in the Great Leveler a direct counter to the Jedi. If Jedi come after him, he can use the Great Leveler to repel any attack, basically. Because the reason Loden Greatstorm escapes is because, well, when Bell comes back into sort of range, he senses him through the Force, and it gives him strength enough to fight back and break free of his captivity. And even though he's been, tortured for a year, he still is able to beat Marchion in combat and sort of reclaim his lightsaber and, basically win the fight. So it establishes that, like, Marchion, as clever as he is not a skilled enough fighter to be able to take down a Jedi on his own, even using a lightsaber and stuff like that. So Marchion has to use this other stuff to gain the advantage. And now here is a way for him to protect himself against Force users. There still feels like there's a lot more to come in terms of what is his ultimate goal. Like, he talks about how he hates the Republic constantly, and that's the general Nihil thing. But he otherwise seems to disagree with how sort of brutish most of the Nihil are, and seems to have more of a nuanced plan. But what exactly is it, and what is he hoping to accomplish, is kind of the interesting thing in all of this. With Mari San Tekka, we get some scenes of her basically talking to Loden through the Force. So I suppose that basically reveals she is Force sensitive, which I don't think we knew from the first book. But we had suspicions that that is an aspect of how she knows how to use the path so effectively. And the result of this is that communicating with someone seems to help her. And she sort of like notes by the end that she's going to be sort of like better going forward or something like that. So maybe she's now more aware of the situation that she's in and won't give paths out or something along those lines. But that's really what happens on that whole side of the story. Because again, the villains, it's the most sort of focused part of the book. Because otherwise we're dealing with this Jedi, then that Jedi, and that Jedi. And they all have their own separate things going on. But the Nihil specifically are very focused. With regards to where the other members end up, Pan Eyta, by the end of this book, is basically missing in action. So he ends up creating this situation where he forces, like, him and Ro hate each other. They both want to kill each other. So Ro tries to assassinate Pan Eta, but because of like the Jedi attack, his plan to kill Pan Eta gets disrupted. But Lorna, over the course of the book, also develops a want to kill Pan because during the attack on the Republic Fair, she goes onto the ground, he stays up in his ship, and he starts aerial bombardments on the ground before he has any idea if she's out of the way or not, and he like did it on purpose, obviously. He acts like he didn't mean to, but, you know, most of the injuries she suffers on the ground are not because of the Jedi she was fighting, it's because of being caught up in explosions from his ship. So she plays it kind of really well in that Marchion is like this close to killing Pan Eta. Like he poisons him at the end and Pan's about to like immediately die straight away. Lorna gives him the antidote and acts like she's on his side, but then reveals later that, yeah, it wasn't an antidote, it was just, it slowed down the progress of the drug and it made it seem like you're recovering, but it's just making it slower so that, you know, I can do what I want to you. The other thing is obviously towards the end of the book where there's the sort of trick with the kind of, tricking the Nihil to attack a specific location. She convinces a lot of Pan's Storm to not participate in the attack. So he goes into this attack missing part of his forces and walking into a trap. So his force gets annihilated. Now, you think this is the end of Pan Eta, killed after like basically betraying everyone. But no. Interestingly, he separates the core of his ship from his main ship and escapes into hyperspace because he reveals that he has this one path that he sort of kept secret. I think he mentions he got it from Marchion Ro's father and that it will take him to a place no member of his species should go. I can't remember the exact wording on what they said, but it was something like, you know, Pan Eta I think is a Doatin. It's the kind of big kind of brute species that has the kind of, you know, horn kind of things down here. Anyway, and it's something along those lines of like, he's going to a place that it's sort of last ditch. He hasn't used this before for a reason. Now, he is dying of the poison still, and obviously now has no support from the Nihil, but they sort of note that like he's basically still alive going into the next book. Like, Lorna D barely escapes the attack on Gryzel at the end. Same with Marchion, and I think Zetar survives as well. So, you know, the three main Tempest runners in the book are still alive, but Lorna has her doubts. She's questioning her loyalty to some of the other Tempest runners, and likely to Ro as well, because he's so off with his, like, artifacts that that's what he's more focused on, where she more supports the Nihil. Now she has issues with Pan, and so really Zetar, who's probably the least interesting of the Tempest runners, is the only like proper guy you have left. So it really feels like the Nihil are in this like awful position where they've probably at this stage lost half of their forces, so they need to build up again. And is the Great Leveler enough to do that? I'm not sure. Let's get into the other side of the stuff here, the kind of hero characters and so on. So, like I said, the opening of the book is the attack on the Cyclor shipyards. Bell and his new master, Indira Stokes, are there to defend it. They have some kind of fighter pilot action in the vectors. They sort of establish here that, like, Bell goes in a little bit too overly sure of himself because he's still only getting used to flying a vector, and gets himself hit by a harpoon through the ship, through his gut. So he has to recover from a pretty near mortal injury. They establish that he's put in the back of the tank, he heals, but that he has sort of like mechanical guts to a degree now, a little bit. They don't get across that it's like this, like he's now hugely mechanical, but he does have some mechanical augmentation to address the fact that he was quite heavily injured in all of this. The main dynamic with Bell over the course of the book is that he's still dealing what he feels is the death of Loden. Because we know, as the audience, Loden's been captured by the Nihil secretly on the Gaze Electric by Ro, but he thinks Loden died in the battle at the end, and everyone else does as well. So they're all thinking that, oh, Bell is just suffering with like what's happened to his master, and they talk about how like he's sort of purposely like, you know, kept himself away from the Force. He's sort of shut off his connection a little bit to the Force. Because it's painful for him, that if he connects to the Force, he connects to the Force where Loden isn't a part of it anymore. And that's how he sort of is dealing with his grief at this point in time. Interestingly, as the book goes on, it's actually him getting to meet Stellan that sort of helps him through that, because Stellan is also dealing with something quite similar himself. Now, this confused me for a while in terms of, like, they basically established Stellan, Geos's master, Ranakanth, has died recently. And I was kind of thinking, like, did this happen in Light of the Jedi or in one of the other books or what? Because the way they talk about it, it's like she didn't die in battle, I don't think. But that she just, like, she was old and she passed away or something like that. So it's not as maybe tragic as what happened to Bell, but he's still suffering from it. Even though he's a new member of the council and stuff like that, he's dealing with the loss of his own master. And so he's able to sort of tell that, like, oh, Bell has similar feelings that I'm feeling with. It's just they're harsher in a way. So he's able to kind of help Bell with some, like, meditation help and so on. And it really helps, to the point where, like, he feels like more of the character where you feel like, oh, is this the guy who's going to train Bell going forward, more so than Indira, because he almost helps Bell more than she does. That she is very much like this fill-in master who's doing her job well and he likes her, but she's not Loden, and she was off doing different things when Stellan was helping him out here. So that is kind of interesting. So, you know, Bell is there at the fair when the attack comes in. He's mainly helping with a lot of the evacuation stuff, the attack on the Innovator and what happens there. Interestingly, he loses his lightsaber in all of this, and then Stellan ends up giving Bell his master's lightsaber, because they get across the idea that Stellan, part of what he's struggling with is this idea that he struggles to believe that his master's gone, and so is holding onto her lightsaber as if, like, you know, she's still around almost, and that it's this lightsaber that he doesn't use but he holds onto until in the middle of the big battle, the attack on the fair, he's forced to use that lightsaber to save his life. And this sort of starts him finally accepting what happened to his master, and that she's always with him, she's one with the Force, and the way the Jedi usually think about these things. And he moves past it in this moment, and has his second wind in the battle, and he gets this huge, incredible moment that I think you can see on, like, the alternate cover for the book, which is his own lightsaber, his master, double lightsabers out, defending the Chancellor. The Chancellor tells her to sort of was it Targans, I think they're called, the two lion things that protect her, to defend Stellan. So he's fighting two lightsabers with two lion things to back him up against the Nihil. Such a cool visual in the book. He gets some real hero moments here. Stellan, I would sort of describe as being our sort of Obi-Wan of this era, is I think the impression that I get. It's a character who likes to be the teacher. They say he's a little bit of kind of a know-it-all sort of, but he doesn't mean to be that way. He just likes to teach, and he gets frustrated a little bit that people sort of view him always trying to help people as him being sort of this kind of naggy teacher type thing. But he I think represents sort of the best of the Jedi overall, in that he's just been put on the council and is sort of struggling in a way with, like, the high position that he's been given, and that, you know, he'd almost prefer to be the teacher. He'd prefer to be just in meditation, but he is forced into this bigger role, like Avar is with the Drengir conflict, and now he is, at the end of this attack on the Republic Fair, effectively asked by the Chancellor, I want you in charge of going after the Nihil. So we have this really cool dynamic where, of the three sort of, noted, I suppose, prodigy Jedis of their era, Stellan, Avar, and Elzar, who all grow up together as Padawans. Stellan is now basically in charge of, I suppose, the campaign against the Nihil. Avar is in charge of the campaign against the Drengir. And Elzar has just been made a master as of, I think, the last book at the start when he's introduced. He has his whole, dark side, visions plot that they're dealing with, which is quite interesting. But it's this idea, like, here are three of our main focus characters, and this is the kind of approach that they're taking with them. The idea that I get with Stellan is that they're going to play on the idea of he is now probably the Jedi most kind of interlinked with the more politics side of things, with the Republic, with the Chancellor, that he's going to have to deal with the idea of what the Jedi want to do versus what the Republic want to do. Because I think we're ultimately going to tackle this idea of how do the Jedi get so intertwined with the Republic that the Republic's fall is basically the Jedi's fall as well. Why we're sort of in a situation right now where the Jedi assist the Republic because they support the Republic, but they're not so heavily intertwined like they are in the prequels. And I think we're gradually getting there. Lina Soh asking him to do this and giving him good reasons for, like, it's not that I want you here because, you know, I see the Jedis as the best warriors, but you are symbols of hope for the people because you saved me in the middle of that battle. And on the HoloNet, the visuals of, like, you holding me after the explosion, people look at that and they don't see a warrior in the middle of combat. They see a Jedi being compassionate for someone that they wanted to protect and save. That is very different. That's why I've chosen the Jedi to lead this attack, because people will support the Jedi more than they'll support an army commander. And that's kind of her approach in all of this, that there's this other political angle in the book of one of the senators, Tia Toon, who's from Sullust, I believe. He is very much like the opposition to the Chancellor. He doesn't really agree with, in his mind, the frivolous spending of money on all of these great works like the Fair and so on. He wants money to be spent on the Republic Defense Force. He basically wants a Republic army because he wants the Republic to be able to defend itself and not have to rely on the Jedi. And now, they really go hard in on this guy as being the opposition, and they kind of make you almost hate him at certain points. But they write this character, who's relatively minor in the book, so well that you have to almost be reminded of the fact that we are not really in the era for politics in the Republic where every senator nearly is corrupt. The senators still mean well at this point in time, and everything that he does is ultimately because he supports the Republic. He likes the Jedi. He just doesn't like the overuse of the Jedi by the Chancellor and the Reliance. He wishes that the Republic could do more on their own. And so this is a fun moment, like towards the end of the book, where the Jedi are actually like, okay, we see that he actually cares about the Republic. He's shown us in a few of these instances that, like, he has his views, but he's reasonable. We'll use him and the fact that he comes across as being anti-Jedi to trick the Nihil into attacking this place. And he does it, he agrees with it fully, and it's just like, I'll do anything I can to help the Republic, but I have my views. And it's just that really nuanced portrayal of a character that I actually really, really liked in this book. So he came out of this, like, I remembered this character, even though he's only in a handful of scenes. So I think Stellan is going to have to deal with more of the politics kind of angle on things going forward, and he might struggle with being in such a leadership position of, like, he's just on the council and now he's in this really important position where he's kind of the Jedi closest to the Chancellor. So that's going to be fascinating going forward. Elzar, like I said, has a bit more of the dark side stuff. He had his big vision at the end of the previous book, and in this book he continues with that, where he's still deeply affected by this vision where he saw all of his friends dying, basically the failure of the Jedi, and he feels that this is about to happen. Now, over the course of this book, we get a few things happening here, where you think they're going down the Anakin road of, like, he's going to become too attached to the people around him, he's going to fall to the dark side. That's the path they're going with Elzar Mann. But interestingly, they play it more like, here is a Jedi who sort of falls to his temptations, but is very aware he's doing that, and aware that he wants to stop doing that, and that it's really a lot of the build-up for him is, when will he finally ask his close friends for help with this, to help him get over these issues that he's dealing with the dark side and other things. And I think by the end of the book, I very much feel like, okay, the visions I'm still a bit worried about, that he's going to get them and be very affected by them. He's always going to be sort of a tortured Jedi to a degree. But I don't think he will fall to the dark side, because he does at the end of the book ask Stellan for help. his close friend, he finally asks, I need help. I tapped into the dark side in the middle of the attack on the fair, and what I did was incredibly powerful, and I'm aware that I shouldn't do that, and that I need to work on this. On the other side of things, it's sort of revealed that I get the impression he's done this a few times with other women, but that the fair coordinator, he effectively sort of starts a relationship with it. Like they sleep together, and he makes a big deal about this. And then towards the end of the book, he goes to her kind of feeling like, I have to break things off with her. And then he's basically like let away with it, because she's kind of like, did you really think we were starting a relationship? You know, we just had some fun together for a night. It's fine. Like, I didn't expect that we'd like be together or anything like that. And he's kind of like, oh, like I've been like really torturing myself over the fact that I did this with you, and it's not a big deal to you. I guess it's not a big deal to me, and I'll just try to be better about that. And the help he's getting from Stellan should help with that as well. So it just kind of feels like, oh, okay, we'll see how it goes in terms of will the help work. But I get the impression it's not going to be a simple, like, he is the Anakin of this era type thing. There's a little bit more nuance going on with this character that I think is going to be interesting to follow as we go through this. Because the other dynamic that they play on with Elzar over the course of the book is they introduce a character named Ty Yorick, who at the moment is a saber for hire, so effectively a bounty hunter, kind of. She gets hired by these two inventors to be their kind of bodyguard, and she comes into contact with Elzar at the fair. Now, she nearly kills Elzar, but they eventually turn the tables on her. They take her lightsaber away from her, and right towards the end of the book, when they really need her help, Elzar's put in this position where, like, we need as much help as we can get. And it's this kind of big moment of trust where he gives the lightsaber back to her. She runs off, but then returns at a moment when Elzar actually needs help to help him. And then the two realize that, okay, we've got to do something big to turn the tides here. So they connect with each other in the Force, and basically tame these two dragon-like animals and fly them into battle and turn the tides. Now, there's a few things that are going on here. One is that you basically get the reveal that Ty Yorick used to be a Jedi Padawan, and she left the Order because of an incident that happened in the past. Now, they go into a little bit of the details on this, but obviously don't reveal the full thing. They establish that she used to be friends with another Padawan called Cleus Teradine, and she also is not part of the Order anymore. And some incident happened at a place called Yellow something or other. They talk about, like, a choice was made, someone died, and the result is where Ty is at the moment. Now, obviously, it's the idea of a Jedi becomes sort of a bounty hunter. That's gone off the path a little bit. But by the end of the book, you really see that she is being influenced by the Jedi, and, like, some of her, I suppose, who she used to be is beginning to come back out. The hardness that you need in a way to be a bounty hunter, is some of that's beginning to fall away, and the old Jedi teachings are maybe beginning to come back in. She has quite a good banter back and forth with Elzar, to the point where, like, they tease the idea of, like, she's like, I hope you'll teach me that move later on. Now, she goes off on her own at the end, and they sort of go past the idea that, like, he might take her back in as an apprentice or something like that. But there's also maybe a hint of, like, romance between these two, maybe if she comes back into the story, who knows. But it's this idea of, like, how would that work? Like, will Ty come back into the Order? Will she stay away? Or will Elzar leave the Order and, like, train her outside of it or something like that? It feels like some sort of a dynamic like that is going to come into play at some stage, perhaps. So that's the core of what they do with Elzar. He gets the help at the end. Stellan is kind of put in charge of the Nihil hunt at the end and uses that power to execute some of the stuff that happens towards the end. I suppose from a plot perspective, I'll talk about that. So at the end of the battle on the Republic Fair, the Nihil retreat, they find out that the Nihil have access to kind of communications from the Republic. And they're like, okay, we can use this to our advantage. They've just, like, they can tap into, they overhear a communication from the Nihil, and they're like, the Nihil are talking about, well, where should we attack next? Will we attack the Cyclor shipyards, or what about the Herdaz system, the system from the first book where the Jedi had their big victory, or will we attack there? We're not sure. We'll wait. We'll listen to more of the communications and see what decision to make. So Stellan is like, okay, we can use this to our advantage, and this is where he goes to Tia Toon and is like, okay, I want you to talk to this person and basically reveal this specific information. The Nihil are going to listen to this, and this will determine where they're going to attack. So Tia Toon talks to this guy and is just like, I can't believe what the Jedi have done. They've reinforced the system where they had their big victory, and they've left no one to defend the shipyards, which are very important to the Republic. And so Pan on the other end of the call is like, oh, this is interesting. They've left the shipyards unguarded. Let's attack there again. And so that's where Pan gets himself into trouble, because it's obviously a trap. And Lorna does what she does to sort of sabotage Pan as well. So he gets obliterated at the shipyards. And they don't really focus on that much. Like, that is an easy win, basically, at the shipyards. So the other thing that happens at this same time is the other plot with Ty Yorick. The two inventors that hired her to be the bodyguard, their invention is a nullifier device that will, in a certain range, basically takes out blasters. They can't be used, and turns off lightsabers. They want to sell this to someone at the fair, which turns out to be Tia Toon, but he immediately is just like, this is illegal. This energy source that powers it is dangerous and illegal. You should be arrested because of this. So you think he's maybe betraying the Republic, but he's not. He's like, he goes full, Republic, drop the law book on them on this situation. As the attack comes in, the mother of these two inventors is killed, but the daughter is still around. It is revealed later that the daughter is actually the mastermind behind the inventor. She actually is the truly, truly special one. But right at the end, after the attack comes in, they reveal that Claren is her name. She reveals that the plans for the nullifier device have been tampered with. So the Nihil were on this ship. They likely know about this device. So I think we should, so we need to do something about this. And Ty, who's just about to leave, is kind of like, I need to tell the Jedi about this. Like, the Nihil will have such an advantage if they gain access to this nullifier device. So she goes to Elzar and tells him. So this is a pretty cool part of the book. In the attack, they managed to capture one individual Nihil member who's kind of high up. So they keep him prisoner. And what they do is they basically fake this, escape attempt, where they basically let him go. There's a bit of a scene that happens. They act like Elzar loses it and goes full dark side. The Nihil guy takes Claren hostage, which wasn't part of the plan, but they know roughly what's going to happen. And you're wondering, what exactly is going on here? Are they going to track him or what? The reveal ultimately is that they let this incident happen right next to a ship, and they had Bell and Indira basically hide out on that ship. So the ship that they knew would be taken for him to escape, he's now on with a hostage. He leaves and obviously goes to Gryzel. So he reveals to Bell and Indira, just through flying, he brings them to the homeworld, or home base of the Nihil. This is where Bell comes into contact with Loden through the Force. This is where Loden has his escape attempt basically, and fights Marchion, which is a pretty cool sequence. It's great in terms of Bell's emotions to see just how intense he is about his master is alive again, and it's an incredible moment. But obviously, eventually everyone realizes, okay, it's Gryzel, we have to head to Gryzel. But this is obviously where the whole everything happens. The attack kind of comes in, and the Nihil are forced to retreat from the big Republic attack that comes in here. I'll admit I did lose a little bit track of what exactly was going on with the nullifier plot in the middle of all of this, because I thought the intent with all of this was that Ty needed to warn the Jedi that the Nihil might already have the plans to the nullifier, but then Claren kind of betrays everyone and tries to sell her kind of pocket version of it to them then and there, but they do save her in the end. And then maybe I need to reread the last section a little bit again, but I never quite got the impression of like, wait, what happened with regards to this plot? Do the Nihil, do they have access to this or not? Was part of the intent of this to get plans back? Because it felt like the guy took the plans with the sole reason of like he took Claren hostage because she would have access to the plans, which gave the impression like they didn't have them otherwise. So I was a little bit like, what's going on here? What am I meant to take from this as the main like plot takeaway? But anyway, that's that. So I guess Ty is going to be effectively looking after Claren, who's still kind of young and just lost her mother, and that's the dynamic they're going with for her. She's going to be in, I think, the star of one of the new spin-off comics that's coming out. So she's quite an interesting character. Again, the backstory I'm very interested to get into, because it looks like one of the other angles we're going to take in the High Republic is probably reveal stuff about like a few members of the Lost that we hear about in the prequels come from the High Republic era, and is why the good era of the Jedi begins to, go into the prequel era, basically. That something really happens here that where they lose a few Jedi, and it's the Dooku book, which I think was a Cavan Scott book. He references that a few times here. Like, I think Terradine is referenced in that book. I think the main character from the comic series, the Marvel comic series, is also referenced as one of the Jedi who left. So we're waiting for stuff like that to happen, just to see a few of these Jedi. What forces them to sort of leave the Order in a way, that they become one of the Lost Jedi. So that's pretty interesting. In terms of other stuff, there's a cool new Jedi called Orba Linn who gets introduced. He's sort of a gelatinous species, but he's in like a spacesuit. He has a cool fight with Lorna Dee. He's actually quite fun. He's an archivist, so he fights while giving all these like facts about the artifacts around them. The only other death apart from Loden for a Jedi is Mikel Sutmani, the Ithorian Jedi, who was in some of the previous books. He wasn't one of the main Jedi, but he's a character who is taken out. His ship gets shot down and he crashes, and they confirm he's dead. There is I'm not gonna say weird. It just felt a little like, what are you doing with this plot? That happens in the book with Lina So's son, so the Chancellor's son, Kit Rep. And effectively what it is they establish that he's kind of shy, he doesn't like to be in the spotlight. But he starts a friendship and I guess then a relationship with this boy who's also the son of someone high up politically. And as the fair starts, they go off together. They sneak off together because I suppose they started the relationship. And they go on to the Innovator. And they're on the Innovator as it's attacked. So I guess that the point of this plot was to kind of have characters that we know not be Jedis or like characters capable of getting out of situations very easily, but that we sort of care about be on this ship and have a little bit of a disaster scene in the middle. I just felt like the timing, especially of one of the chapters, which was one of the longer chapters in the book, which was just focused on Kit Rep, this other guy, this like older alien species guy, and it's like, okay, I get it, they're in trouble on the ship, we're worried about these characters, but what are you doing here? Eventually like Bell comes in and helps them, but especially where they just ended off on this, I find it really like, what was the point of this? That, okay, by the end they reveal, I guess Kit Rep and this other boy are in a relationship because he kisses him, and I think the HoloNet picks that up. So unless they're going to make it like a big plot point that like there's some sort of political thing here of like, the sons of these two high up people are in a relationship, how will they deal with this? And unless it like impacts like his mother's career or something like that, I'm not really sure necessarily where they're going with that in terms of there being some reveal of some sort about it. Maybe there's something I missed in the book, but it just felt like if there was any like ABCD plot that just kind of felt like you could probably take it out and the book doesn't change too much, it probably was that, even though, I guess it's another relationship thing that they're going for here for some representation, that's fine. It just, it didn't flow as well, because that big chapter happens like right as in the middle of the Attack on the Republic Fair, where you're kind of like, no, let me get back to Stellan and his big battle. Let me see what Elzar and like Ty are up to, and so on. What is Bell up to? So there's that. And then yeah, Bell going forward is going to be fascinating, because he got the hope for his master being alive again, and then it was taken away from him in an even more brutal way than it happened previously. And now it's like he felt like he lost his master, but there was a bit of like mystery, unresolved aspects to it. Here it's just one, the torturous experience of being around the Leveler. Like, Bell is force sensitive as well, so he was affected by the creature also. But then knowing that his master was turned to stone by it right next to him and died, it's really brutal to see where he goes, because you already saw in this book him struggle with the grief of losing him, and now he's lost him in a worse way. Where do we go from here? And then like Indira, how's she going to be able to help Bell coming out of this? And like I said, there was maybe a slight tease that might Stellan be the one to help him, but Stellan maybe seems a bit busy with Elzar as well as his overall plan now, so I don't see him taking a Padawan on. But they also get across that, again, Bell is basically to be knighted at some point. He's on the verge of becoming a knight, so he almost like doesn't need a master anymore. But it feels like there's still a little bit to go, and that he can't become a knight until he deals with his griefs around his master. So I'm very interested to see where they go with Bell coming out of this, because he in a way has been the main through line across the first two books, in a way, in terms of like the character you really latch onto and connect with as one of our younger characters. So that's going to be key. And I'm wondering, like I said, they did the reverse of what you expected them to do with Elzar, where they almost really made you believe like Elzar's going down the dark path. But actually, I don't think he is. He's getting the help that he needs. I don't think they'll reverse that again. Bell, who you see as being like, oh yeah, the perfect, up-and-coming Jedi, might he now be going on a dark path because of what's happened here? Again, a lot depends on what they reveal about what the Great Leveler does, what it does to someone, how it impacts them, does it change them, and just how Bell handles this. But I think we'll see a change in the character going forward. I think that's pretty much everything I want to talk about. If I left out any plot points that you want to see me talk about, definitely comment about them below, and I'll do my best to comment back. But yeah, there are a lot of the details I came out of this book sort of talking about. Just, it definitely felt like sort of like a middle book of a trilogy, that I'm expecting kind of big things from the next book, because I'm hoping they reveal the stuff with Marchion, as well as a few other things. So I'm excited to see that book get revealed. I don't think we know what the next adult novel is, but we do have, like I said, I still have to read Race to Crashpoint Tower. Out of the Shadows, I'm actually really excited for. And the manga coming out, I'm excited to see what the manga is like as well, and to catch up with the comics. So there's a lot of High Republic stuff that I'm actually quite interested in, but I do want to also see what's happening next. So that has been the review for The Rising Storm. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.